Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BizzTalk Africa. I'm your host, Jason Schuster from BizzTech. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Vidya Mike. How you doing today, Vidi?
Wonderful. Absolutely splendid. Looking forward to today.
Me too. Me too. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm still in Tampa, but I'm going to be in Europe next week.
Next week. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure Tampa will miss you, but it'll be the
Hell,
UK will be happy to have you back.
When I see the grey clouds in England, I'll be missing Tampa. Believe me.
That's right. That's right. And Vidya and I are here today with a really wonderful guest, Patson, who is representing the African Union. Patson, we're really excited to have you here today. Thanks for being here. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Vidya and Jason. I am very well, thank you, and greetings from South Africa.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Patson, can we start the show off? Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and kind of what led you up to this point and your involvement in the African Union?
Most definitely. As I've mentioned, I am from South Africa. I have been in the civil society space for about 11 years now. Prior to that, though, I actually had aspired to have a career in the seminary. Imagine that the earthquake that happened when I went into church for the very first time. But after that, found myself going straight into the civil space, primarily with the idea of service. I'm quite young, and having seen how young people, particularly in my country, were deprived of opportunity, and even with my own experience, 2008, 2009 was when the financial crisis hit South Africa pretty hard, and employment was very difficult. And so, you had very few choices, and one of the choices that I decided to make was to get into a position where I create value. And the economic model of South Africa, and as is with many African countries, is still a bit adverse to newly innovative companies. But the civil society space has a chance and an option from whence it can help working with government, working with established private sector to create more spaces, especially within the policy space. I found myself in the African Union based on recognition from the time that I've been doing as a youth activist with the Organization of African Youth. And before that, I'd already done quite a few engagements with the United Nations, our own government, various agencies within the multilateral system. But now I am at the Economic, Social, and Cultural Council, which is the advisory body of the African Union, which is basically attributed towards harnessing the interaction between civil society as well as government in implementing the African Union agendas. And I'm deputy presiding officer there at the moment.
Excellent. Excellent. Wow. You've already had a crazy journey, and like you said, you're really young. So I'm excited to see where where your career goes from here. And you're already making a big difference. And yeah, Vidya, what do you think?
Oh, you know me. I have a ton of things that started to pair. So I mean, absolutely, you're just making such a huge impact. But I tell you what, I love where you started from and the decisions you made, when you analyze what the options were. But even though it was difficult, the choice you made wasn't the easy choice. It was a choice of saying, you know what, if I'm having this problem, the rest of the youths are having this problem, the rest of Africa is having this problem. How do I then take that in a very positive way, create unity, create an environment where we could sort of start to harness energy and move forward? And just by what you've established and you've done for yourself, it shows you don't have to wait on handouts or wait on anybody to give it to you. You can make it happen. It also shows with the right determination and attitude, the opportunities are there.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the topic for today, how Africa is going to become a global powerhouse. So
I'm so excited for this topic, by the way.
Absolutely.
We have had so many guests on BizzTalk Africa this year, and I feel like it's really been building up to this topic, which is Africa is becoming a global powerhouse. But how do we get there? Like,
that's right.
What else is needed? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm excited.
So if you could take us through what else is needed, as Jason said, but then what are the things we need to watch that prevents that from happening? Well, what are the obstacles in place, and what needs to happen to actually get rid of those obstacles to even move faster?
Indeed. In fact, I'm a history buff, so I'm going to do quite a bit of comparison with how other societies have developed, because you'll see quite a bit of congruence between that and the continent as it is currently. There's a book by a philosopher called Oswald Spengler, which was known as The Decline in the West. But he was not necessarily speaking to the fact that the West is going to dilapidate inevitably, but rather he was making comparisons of the cyclical avenues in which civilizations go and what Europe can do in order to secure itself within its part within this particular time of civilization. And for the African continent, if you were to mirror it with the emancipation of countries, especially in Europe after the rule of the Roman Empire, and even the United States after the Emancipation Proclamation, you'll find that there have been quite a few similarities. Number one being the fact that there have been cries for the individualization of the person, a universal suffrage, so to say. With Europe going away from monarchies to actual having and being subjects of a king, to actually having your own personal civil rights, human rights, and right to property ownership, right to enterprise, and right to capital, and going on to the colonies, with the United States being one of the forerunners of that, where they say, you know what, we cannot enterprise in this land and find ourselves turning out the majority of the profits in taxation towards a country that's 1,000 miles away. Hence the Boston Tea Party and all the avenues that were used to inevitably bring about the independence of the United States. And going right up to now with Africa, where we are now fully an independent continent because of the systematic realizations of the previous generation of knowing that there is a need for universal suffrage, particularly with an emphasis of politics, which is why there was the establishment of the Organization of African Unity. The primary reason for that was the full liberation of the African continent from colonial rule, for political will to be expressed through democracies within the African continent, based on contexts and culture, etc. But as we went into the new millennium, the Organization of African Unity then said, fine, now we have accomplished the goal of liberating the nations. But we are stuck with economies that still have the same economic model, which is the extraction of raw materials for the production of finished goods. And in the supply chain, we basically end up being on the user end again of our own goods and actually receiving them back at a markup. So how do we curb that? Hence the transition from the Organization of African Unity to the African Union, whose main focus is a people-centered, people-driven African Union development. And with so doing, there was the establishment of what is known as Agenda 2063, which is the 50-year development plan of the African Union. Many people, when they see that, they think, okay, 50 years, that's a bit too far. But what we then did is we made sure that there's a decade plan of action for each of the aspirations that are in there. There's about 7 of them, of which are available on the African Union website. And so, as you will see, with the different universal agreements, there is a choice towards making sure that people have their own universal suffrage. There is a chance to create their own capital and inevitably develop themselves. But the pace at which that happens, that is a natural occurrence as well as an occurrence of development of peoples, and that will take time at the end of the day. But in terms of the policy objectives as well as the political goodwill, that is going within the framework of how society tends to go in terms of development of societies and civilizations.
Dino, on that point, and it's brilliant how you sort of bridge that gap. But as I study Agenda 2063, which is something that happens, right? I study everything. What's really interesting about your framework, and especially when you try to link it with the SDGs, is there's some things that the SDGs don't cover. And I really love the fact that, number 14 in particular, a stable and peaceful Africa. I mean, when you look at it, you think it's obvious, right? We should have peace. That should be one of the fundamental things. When you have the preservation of Renaissance and culture and all of these sort of stuff, that is so critical for any evolving environment. Even it doesn't matter if you don't really have history, because we are history right now, right? Wherever we are history. And whilst history, coming back to how you started this, history repeats itself. Do you know what? Hindsight is more powerful. We have enough information. Let us be a data-driven world. We have the history. We know what went wrong. Let's not do it again. And let us put that forward into making Africa the powerhouse that it should be. Because it's not about one country or another country or who has what. The fact is, we're all one people under this world and under this umbrella and environment. And Africa is the last continent that has so much unspoiled land. It has history, it has culture, it has the most amazing people. Jason and I have had the time of our life hosting this series this year. And there's so many people outside that says, we want to go to Africa and do this. Do you know what? Africa could do it themselves inside. And then help comes in from everywhere else to make it happen. And how I've never seen Agenda 2063. And I thank you for sharing it. And for viewers, please go online to African Union, which is au.int, and check out the 2063 agenda, and also in particular linking the agenda with the SDGs, because I think there's so much information in there and it's very exciting. There must be a lot of work that went in to that.
In fact, one thing that is not actually touted quite a bit about Africa's contribution to the SDGs is that before there was actually a framework from which the SDGs were going to be built, there was an African Common Position on SDGs. One of the co-chairs of the drafting agency or the drafting committee that came up with the post-2015 development agenda that was adopted at the 2015 General Assembly session was Kenya. And one of the key drivers of that, of those key indicators, is Agenda 2063. But in terms of the African aspect, particularly in terms of peace, as you've rightly said, history does repeat itself. Now, if you look at Aspiration 4, which speaks to a peaceful and secure Africa, it also has as one of the sub-points of implementation that it is envisioned that Africa will be a place where the differences and the diversity is not a place of adversity, but rather complements to one another in securing development. And one of the things that has been that has been touted quite a bit, especially with regards to African development as well as reaching out to Africa, is the lack of current development. So to say, because people are saying there's a fourth industrial revolution, but yet Africa has barely made it out of the first industrial revolution in many countries, to be honest. And that is true. But again, if you look back at history with regards to certain European countries that had just come out of colonialism, with the Dark Ages, there had been a rift between scholarly development as well as people development. English was a peasant language in England for a very long time. In fact, the elite spoke French and Latin. Most of the communications, particularly of the real establishers of the English kingdom, spoke French and Latin. It was only after the Protestant movement really moved in and started saying, no, but you know what? Let us indigenize first our faith, which was the primary source of thought, and let us indigenize our market, which was their primary source of capital. And that's basically what is happening in Africa now, where we are now in a position where we have to make sure that there is free thought, which can be manifested in both political will, as well as educational, as well as philosophical will, and also in terms of the arts and culture. In fact, the key points of the Renaissance that made development so pivotal and so memorable in that period was the arts and culture.
Dino, people come together. It's funny.
Exactly.
Arts and music and entertainment.
Africa at this point in time, with this year, is actually celebrating a year of the promotion of the arts and culture in Africa. And so this particular year is very, very key, because many people, when they look at African arts and culture, they just think, oh, a painting, or a song. But if we are able to maximize on that, this can be a very key element towards the African Renaissance we talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly, as you started to sort of dive a little bit deeper into that, I like Section 8, a united, federal, and confederate Africa.
Yes.
That's really interesting, right? So we've started with the African Free Trade Agreement. There's some headway there. And I think, if we look back at the guests we've had on this show in the past, and some of the guests we're having now, everybody wants this. We spoke to people from every single country, and everybody wants this united Africa. And I think the time has come. So I'm glad it's there. And it's by actually supporting and I love this one, continental financial and monetary institutions established and functional. So we have seen no end of, payment platforms and digital platforms and wallets and this and that. That's all cool. But that banking financial framework need to be in place. The regulations need to be in there. Regulations are very important. It does protect people. It does make sure we do everything in a standardized manner. And once we have that, then you can have proper cross-border. It's not about making a quick buck. It's about putting in place an institutional, repetitive way in which the financial support is there for people from now to becoming that global powerhouse that Africa is becoming.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I gotta say this, Patson. I thought I was a history buff. I've got nothing on you. I realized you're understanding. I mean, I'm learning from you right now, and I love this parallel that you're making between America's decolonialization and what led to it becoming an economic global powerhouse. You're saying the same thing is that foundation is happening in Africa right now. Correct. That's kind of the okay. So now that's happening, the framework is there. It's moving in that direction. Like Vidi was saying, we've had tons of entrepreneurs on this show. The entrepreneurial spirit in Africa is truly impressive. I mean, it is. Yes. There's a hunger. There's a hunger for creating something, growth. That growth mindset. It's everywhere. I love it. So, what's next? Now what? like Vinny was saying earlier in the show, now what?
Indeed, I think the main, it's actually threefold. Firstly, as I had spoken earlier, that the first thing that really got people or societies going in terms of developing themselves was free thought. So it's really important that member states really take seriously the African Charter on democracy, elections, and governance, because that speaks towards ensuring that people have the freedom to both think and act as free and able citizens and contributing positively towards society. And then the second one is the change in the supply chain mechanism for Africa. For many years, the African continent, even its infrastructure has been developed for mineral and resource extraction. And that has resulted in, if you look even at the geographic map, the most developed countries in the continent are on the coasts, because that's where the resources were shipping out of most of the time, and still till this day. But if you start going inland, it's only roads that are demarcated, at least, and maybe a generator here and there at a mine or at a gas plant,
it's
or something
siloed,
like that.
right? It's just
Exactly.
siloed. It doesn't develop the travel corridors in any way whatsoever.
Exactly. So in order to get that development going, we need to get a supply chain that's a bit more elaborate in terms of what is it that Africa can give to the world that is not simply just first end products. And Rwanda's actually started with that in terms of refining their own gold and getting their own mechanisms going in terms of manufacturing motor vehicles and all the likes. They've got a European partner with partners helping out. For example, Volkswagen is there helping with the car manufacturing, and all the likes. And these are one of the two of them. And then the third one, of course, is the partnership cooperation. So, diplomacy for many years, especially with regards to Africa, has really been a national interest-based diplomacy. When we have done African Union to EU, or African Union to the United States, or African Union to China, there's all these collective communiques and declarations. But the problem then comes in the bilateral systems, because then national interest comes into play, not only just from the African side, but also from our partner side, because at the end of the day, there's still profit in having Africa as a raw material supplier and not necessarily helping to develop the supply chain in that regard. However, if we have a reformed diplomacy mechanism upon which we are able to say it's in the best interest of Africa and in the best interest of the world that Africa develops, because many people think that revolution comes because of starvation. No, true revolution comes because of enlightened expectations. So in other words, when people do not have the worry of basic needs, do not have the worry of job security and retirement, it's much easier for them to be more assertive in their political activism and in their contribution towards more meaningful thought frameworks of developing the continent. And so if we're really serious about getting the African continent to be peaceful, stable, and productive, we need to get the supply chain developed within the threefold that I've suggested.
Beautifully said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, and I guess here's a question. Obviously, you covered some roadblocks, you've covered some next steps. A lot of our guests that have been on the show have indicated that Africa's greatest resource in becoming a global powerhouse is not natural resources, but actually the people. People are Africa's greatest resource. What else besides supply chain, what else needs to happen for Africa to harness that resource in becoming a global powerhouse?
I think that'll definitely rest on intergenerational relations. because the majority of the population in Africa is young people, followed by women. And the problem has been for so long that the African youth development space has been relegated to simply, here's this policy, see what you can do with it. But over time, it's going to have to come to a place and position where people say, no, but young people cannot simply just take a framework that has been developed and see what they can do with it or simply cope with it, but they must be part of the solution. So that's basically from the elders' perspective, to see youth as a resource and as a partner that they can engage in. And I, as a young person, can truly say that we as young people need to learn that we need to earn our seat at the table. For so long, there's an activism that tends to consistently scream for space of development or in the development arena for young people. But the truth of the matter is, power is never given. You have to take it. And you don't take it necessarily by being adversarial or by being abrasive, but by being integral, by showing that you're capable. I was 24 years old when I became Deputy Presiding Officer of the African Union's Economic, Social, and Cultural Council. I'm 29 years old today. So, and that is just one example of someone who has had a chance to get in, and rather than go in and say, look, I'm a young person, put me in. I did the work and I said, you know what, there's going to be a stigma around me when I get into the door. What do I say and what do I do in order for that stigma to go away? Number one, I show them that I know the language of the land. And number two, I know how to merge that language with a plan of which can merge with our generation, and inevitably make sure that the systems that have been established do not get lost to calamity or casualty that is usually caused by regime change and all the likes, because that's usually the fear amongst most African countries and African leadership, is that the moment regime change comes in, everything that was established is going to be taken away. There's going to be an infiltration of so-and-so and all the likes. But if you have young people who can show that indeed they understand how the world works, they know what the value is within the framework that has been created, and they can add more value to it rather than subtract from it. It starts building that trust over time.
Wow.
Beautifully said. I think age is just a number, right? It's how you take that information, how you process that information, what you do with it is what really it's about. That's your age. I was still partying really hard.
Well, and I was.
No. In fact, if you've noticed, I have incredible wrinkles around my face, and that is because I work a lot and I have no friends. Except for work.
Patson, you have two friends here. You could call on us anytime.
That's right.
And BizzTalk are dedicated and want to help African Union achieve what it needs to achieve. So I see that you guys have Africa invites you for the Durban International Convention Center on the 15th and 21st of November. People go online, check it out. There's some exciting things happening.
Absolutely. And my last comment on age, you speak with the power, authority,
of a 600-year-old person.
Yeah, just a sense of you speak with more experience than I would expect from a 29-year-old.
Absolutely.
And people listen. It's easy to see why you are where you are at such a young age, because you would be someone that I would follow. You know what I mean? So I feel it. Now, I have the worst news in the world. We are almost out of time.
Oh no.
We're basically right at our 30 minutes. So it's not enough time. We have to have you back on the show. We need to do another session or two. Would that be okay with you? Could we have you back?
Most definitely. I'll be very happy to be back, but on the condition that you give me time to grow my beard. I definitely made a bad call by shaving. As soon as I saw your mane, I said, I made a mistake.
Agreed. All right, November then. When and we'll both share beards, and I'll send you the beard oil that you need.
I'd really appreciate that. I really would.
Fantastic. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in.
Absolutely.
To Patson, thank you for being here. An incredible show. I cannot wait for the next one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. I
Brilliant.
really enjoyed the session. And
Me
you
too.
know what? I learned so much.
Me too.
Really?
I really did. Until next time, everyone, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.
One tribe.
See you next time. Take
Bye-bye.
care.